The galaxy was a graveyard, its stars flickering weakly under the rule of the alien alliance. The once proud civilizations of countless species reduced to dust or submission planets that had once thrived now lay barren and lifeless. Every corner of space seemed to be covered in the blackened smoke of dying world civilizations, long past their prime, looked to the skies in terror. The sound of battle had become a constant hum in the background, the soundtrack of despair and annihilation. The war was no longer one of hope, but a struggle to survive at best and to delay the inevitable at worst. The invaders were relentless, their ships unlike anything anyone had ever seen. They tore through fleets like paper and crushed resistance with surgical precision. No one had ever been able to stand against them. Not for long. The galaxy had once known peace, once known prosperity, but all of that was fading now. The ancient races that had built great empires and left behind legacies now watched in horror as their legacies were wiped away. Their monuments crumbled under the foot of a seemingly unstoppable force, and no one could even fathom how to fight back. In a small corner of the galaxy, the last free systems gathered together on a remote world that had not yet felt the sting of occupation. This was the last bastion of hope, the last place where the broken leaders of the resistance had made their final stand. They met in the shadows of crumbling ruins beneath the dying light of a fading sun. The galaxy had once called this place home, but now it was little more than a refuge for those too battered to run. Here in this broken space, the resistance leaders gathered their forces and made plans, even though they knew deep down that nothing could stop the unstoppable. Their ships had been destroyed one by one, their fleets scattered across the void in a desperate attempt to evade total annihilation. They were running out of time, and even their hope was running out. They had one final asset left, the coalition of species that had banded together to face the enemy, but their numbers were few and their resolve was faltering. Some still believed they could win, but many were already resigned to the fact that they were no match for the overwhelming might of the enemy. They whispered of a prophecy that had spread across the galaxy about a force that would come when all seemed lost, a force that would save them. But even those who clung to this hope knew it was nothing more than a story, a fairy tale to make them feel better in the face of an impossible reality. And so they gathered their remaining strength and prepared for the final battle, the one they all knew they would lose. The resistance had been fighting for so long they had forgotten what it was like to win. They had forgotten what it was like to have the upper hand. And so as they looked to the sky in search of a miracle, they saw only darkness and empty space. No help was coming. No one could save them. Not now, not ever, or so they thought. And then the message came. A signal cut through the silence of space and pierced the dying world like a beam of light. No one knew where it came from or who had sent it, but the words were clear: humanity had returned. The resistance was shattered, scattered across countless systems. The leaders of the last free species met in secret, their ships barely held together by sheer will and old grudges. Each one of them had seen their world fall and felt the cold fingers of despair grip their hearts. As the alien forces ravaged the galaxy, they tried to coordinate to fight back. But it was like trying to push a boulder uphill. One small victory was always followed by a dozen defeats. Each battle lost added more pressure to their already crumbling spirits. Their forces were dwindling, their supply lines severed, their people forced into hiding. In the command center of the hidden base, a group of Galactic commanders sat huddled over a map of the galaxy, their eyes bloodshot and tired, their minds racing for solutions that didn't exist. They knew that their time was running out. They knew that soon the invaders would turn their attention to this last bastion, and when they did, it would be over. No more chances, no more hope. All they had left was the fight. They couldn't even look to the stars for inspiration anymore. All that remained was the cold silence of space and the crushing weight of inevitable defeat. Each commander looked at the others in the dimly lit room and saw nothing but defeat reflected in their faces. What was left to say? What words could mend the damage done to their people, to their worlds? Their hopes had been shattered, but their pride was still intact. Just barely. They would die with that pride, and if they were lucky, they would make the enemy bleed for every inch they took. One of the leaders, a tall alien with dark skin and glowing eyes, slammed his fist onto the table. He was known for his unwavering resolve, But even he couldn't deny the crushing weight of their situation. "We have to do something," he said, his voice hoarse, as if it carried the burden of the entire galaxy. His gaze moved to the others, but no one spoke, no one offered any solutions. The room felt colder, the silence thickened. Another leader, an older woman whose species had once ruled over an entire star system, finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "We need to accept the reality. We cannot win against them. We are outmatched, outnumbered, and outgunned. We've lost more than we ever thought we would lose. We must retreat and regroup or face certain extinction." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement, but there were no true answers, no solution to what had already been decided. She was right, and everyone knew it. Their fleets had been broken into pieces, scattered like leaves in the wind. Their soldiers were exhausted, their weapons outdated. The enemy had crushed everything in its path, and they were too weak to do anything about it. Yet even in the face of hopelessness, some couldn't let go of a lingering thread of hope. The rumors had been spreading, rumors of a force that could save them. But it seemed impossible. The last time anyone had seen humanity, they had been wiped out on their homeworld. They had been nothing but a footnote in the galaxy's history books, forgotten and erased from existence. Still the rumors persisted, and they clung to them as if it were a lifeline, though deep down they knew the truth. There was no one coming, no army to turn the tide, no great heroes to rise from the ashes. They were alone. But there was one final thought that haunted every resistance leader's mind as they looked into the void. If the rumors were true, humanity had come back, and if they had returned, would they even be able to fight alongside them? Or would they turn away as the rest of the galaxy had? The message had been brief, and yet in those few words there was something powerful, something undeniable, that stirred the hearts of those who still believed. Humanity had returned. The message had barely registered before the galaxy went into chaos. The sudden broadcast cut through the empty spaces of their communications like a scream in the night. It was brief, simple, and strange. The words "humanity had returned" echoed across the frequencies. No one understood who had sent it or how it had reached them, but the shock it caused rippled through every resistance leader like a wave of disbelief. How could it be true? They had all thought humanity was lost, gone in the fires of their homeworld, destroyed in the brutal first wave of the invasion. But here was the impossible message, the undeniable truth: humanity had returned. At first no one believed it. They couldn't. It didn't make sense. But then strange ships appeared from the darkness of space, massive and sleek, like nothing anyone had ever seen. Not a single vessel resembled anything from any known fleet in the galaxy. Their designs were too advanced, too strange. Yet there was an unmistakable insignia flashing on the hulls of the ships. It was human. They all recognized it now. Across the galaxy, commanders watched as these ships moved with terrifying precision into the heart of the enemy's domain. They didn't hesitate, they didn't stall, they simply appeared from the void like a thunderstorm breaking the calm before a strike. Their weapons fired without warning, and their ships tore through the alien forces like they were paper thin. The resistance forces had no time to react. They didn't even understand what was happening. All they knew was that humanity was back, and their ships were not just a symbol of hope, they were something far more terrifying. The alien alliance was caught off guard. Their commanders scrambled to identify the threat, but they couldn't. Their sensors failed to register the speed of the human ships. Their weapon systems were unlike anything the invaders had encountered. Humanity's technology was far beyond what they could have imagined. It wasn't just advanced, it was brutal, it was relentless, and it was designed for one thing: victory. The human fleet didn't bother with formal communications or negotiations. They didn't ask for peace or surrender. They simply arrived with a fury unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Their warships charged forward, tearing through the alien defenses like a hot knife through butter. Every shot that hit an enemy ship was decisive. Every battle ended with a crushing blow to the invaders' morale. Their forces were overwhelmed. The resistance watched in stunned silence as humanity's fleet methodically destroyed the heart of the alien command structures. No one knew who the humans were now, who they had become in their long absence. But what was clear was that they weren't the people who had been wiped out in the early days of the war. These were survivors. These were warriors who had learned and adapted. Their technology had evolved beyond what anyone had thought possible. Their tactics were brutal and swift, and their resolve was unbreakable. Within days, the human fleet had decimated a significant portion of the alien forces. Every battle was a victory. Every ship they destroyed felt like a shift in the balance of power. The resistance couldn't help but wonder what this meant for them. Could humanity truly save them? Could they truly take back their homeworlds from the invaders? As the human ships moved from one victory to the next, one thought haunted the galaxy. What else did humanity have in store? What could they do next? How far would their war fleet go? And more importantly, would they fight for the galaxy or for themselves? The fleet moved like a force of nature, sweeping through the enemy's strongholds one after another, leaving nothing but wreckage and chaos in their wake. And still no one understood who had sent the message, who had returned to the galaxy. But one thing was certain: humanity had not only come back, they had come back to win. The human fleet was like a storm, a violent force that tore through the alien alliance with the savagery no one had ever seen before. Their ships moved in flawless unison, their weapon systems devastating in their efficiency. Enemy fleets were obliterated in a matter of minutes. No hesitation, no mercy, just cold calculation, each strike designed to break the enemy's resolve. Before they even had a chance to retaliate, the resistance watched from afar in stunned silence as the humans dismantled the alien forces they had once believed invincible. On the ground of the occupied worlds, the tide began to shift as well. Humanity's soldiers descended with precision. They fought not just with advanced weapons, but with a brutal efficiency that left the invaders scrambling for cover. They moved like phantoms through cities where alien forces had once ruled, ruthlessly cutting down enemy soldiers and liberating entire sectors with stunning speed. The soldiers didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough to terrify the invaders. They didn't negotiate. They didn't ask questions. They just fought. The human ground forces were a sight to behold. Their tactics were surgical, their technology unparalleled. Each soldier was a master of his craft. Each team coordinated in ways that no other species could replicate. They fought as one unit, each member moving in perfect synchrony, their weapons cutting through enemy armor with ease. Their enemies never had a chance to regroup. Their morale shattered the moment they saw humanity's soldiers on the ground. They didn't fear death, they welcomed it, and in doing so they brought terror to those who thought themselves untouchable. Resistance leaders began to take notice. The humans weren't just fighting alongside them. They were leading the charge. They were doing what no one else had been able to do for years. They were turning the tide in battles that had seemed hopeless. They had taken worlds that had been lost and turned them into beacons of resistance. Entire systems were now free once again, and it was all thanks to humanity's war fleet. One by one, the human warships took down the enemy's largest fleets, each battle leaving the invaders more confused and broken. Humanity didn't just strike their forces, they dismantled their entire strategy. They hit their supply lines, severed their communications, crippled their logistics, and then struck the heart of their command structures with ruthless precision. They didn't leave room for the enemy to breathe, no time for regrouping, no mercy. It wasn't just their technology that made them so terrifying, it was their attitude. It was the way they fought with unyielding resolve. They had no fear of death because they had already faced it and overcome it. They knew what it meant to survive against impossible odds, and they fought with everything they had. They didn't care for treaties or alliances. They cared for one thing only: victory. Humanity's fleet moved from system to system, and with each victory, the galaxy began to change. Worlds once thought lost to the alien invaders now stood tall. Once more, their people freed and emboldened by the humanity's strength. The alliance that had once seemed invincible now found itself being pushed back planet by planet. The resistance was no longer a scattered force, but a united front with humanity leading the charge. Every battle they won sparked a new flame of hope throughout the galaxy, and with each victory, the alien alliance's grip on the galaxy loosened. Humanity had proven they were not here to play games, they were here to win, and they were doing it with an intensity no one had ever expected. The galaxy had never witnessed anything like this before. The human fleet moved with terrifying speed and brutal efficiency. Their ships struck like lightning, their weapons flashing with a deadly brilliance that left nothing but destruction in their wake. Entire fleets of the alien alliance turned to scrap in the blink of an eye, their commanders frantic and confused, unable to comprehend how a force they had never seen before could inflict such havoc so quickly. The alien armada had always believed they were invincible, but humanity was something different, something they couldn't predict. Every engagement was a shock. The human fleet didn't give the invaders a chance to regroup or adapt. They struck with overwhelming force, hitting the enemy where they were weakest and exploiting every flaw in their defenses. They didn't fight fair, they didn't fight with honor, they fought to win. And they did so ruthlessly. It was as if the entire human fleet had been forged in the crucible of war. No hesitation, no mercy, just a single-minded drive to destroy their enemies. The alien alliance began to crack under the pressure. At first, they dismissed humanity as a fluke, as an anomaly. But as their warships fell one after another, the whispers began to spread. Could this truly be humanity? Was this the same species that had once been thought lost? Could they really be capable of turning the tide of war against the most powerful alliance in the galaxy? The Resistance watched in awe as humanity's warships tore through their enemies. It wasn't just their ships that were impressive, it was the way they coordinated their efforts. Their tactics were flawless. They knew when to strike, when to retreat, when to hit hard, and when to wait. The human fleet seemed to know what the enemy was going to do before they did it. And with each victory they grew bolder, more confident, and the Resistance couldn't help but wonder if they had made a terrible mistake in thinking that humanity was gone. And then came the first truly devastating attack. The human fleet ambushed one of the alien alliance's largest staging fleets in the middle of a hyperspace jump. They arrived from nowhere, dropping out of hyperspace without warning, and tore through the invaders' ships as if they were nothing. Entire swaths of the enemy's fleet were wiped out in mere moments as the humans unleashed hell from their advanced weapon systems. The alien forces were blindsided. They had no way to respond to such a brutal and unexpected strike. It was a massacre, and it was only the beginning. This wasn't just a battle, this was the kind of attack that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. It wasn't just the sheer destruction, it was the speed and the efficiency with which humanity struck. The alien alliance was forced to rethink everything they had known. Their forces were shaken, their leadership began to falter. They didn't understand how this new enemy could be so powerful. They had fought against every species in the galaxy, but nothing had prepared them for humanity's rage. As the human fleet continued to press their advantage, the Resistance began to organize more effectively. They had seen the power humanity brought to the table, and they knew that together they might actually have a chance to win. They knew that if they could unite behind humanity's strength, they could break the chains that had held them for so long. And so the galaxy began to awaken. It wasn't just humanity's strength that had inspired the Resistance. It was the courage they showed in the face of an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. Humanity had proven that victory was possible against all odds, and now the galaxy was starting to believe it too. The galaxy had been a place of darkness and despair for so long, but now a spark had been lit, and it was spreading like wildfire. Humanity's war fleet didn't just destroy the invaders' forces, they inspired something greater. They rekindled the flame of resistance in the hearts of those who had already given up. Those who had watched their worlds fall without hope now saw that hope had returned. They began to rally, they began to fight. Across the galaxy, word spread of humanity's victories. The stories of their brutal efficiency, their unrelenting will to win reached every corner of the free systems and beyond. Alien species who had once been resigned to the fact that they were nothing more than pawns in the invaders' game now saw something different. They saw strength. They saw that they were not alone. The resistance groups that had been scattered and broken began to rebuild. They began to unite under the banner of humanity's war fleet. It was no longer just a few ragtag groups scattered across the galaxy. Now it was a coordinated effort, one that spanned dozens of systems that had once been lost to the invaders. Alien species who had once feared humanity's wrath now turned to them as leaders, as symbols of the possibility of victory. The humans had come to their aid when no one else would, and now they stood with them in the fight for their freedom. Humanity's fleet didn't wait for the galaxy to come to them. They pressed forward. They didn't just defend the liberated worlds. They took the fight straight to the heart of the enemy's territory. No longer content to play defense, the humans understood that the only way to win was to break the invaders' strength, to destroy their power base, and to show the galaxy that the invaders were not invincible. On every liberated world, new resistance groups formed. These new forces were stronger than before. They were fueled by the belief that victory was possible, that they could win back what they had lost. The human fleet became a symbol not just of power, but of hope, a light shining in the darkest corners of the galaxy. With each passing day, more and more alien species joined the fight. They knew that they had to act now or face extinction. At the hands of the invaders, they had seen humanity's fury, and they had seen what humanity was capable of, so they fought alongside them, their unity growing stronger with every victory. Together, they formed a coalition that no one could ignore, and the invaders' forces began to fracture, their once unified army crumbling under the pressure. The resistance began to gain ground. Planets once thought lost to the enemy were now liberated, and reclaimed. Humanity's tactics and technology had given them a massive advantage. But it was their spirit, their sheer will to survive, and their unwillingness to surrender that had made the real difference. They fought with a desperation that the invaders could not comprehend, and with every battle won, the galaxy saw that it was no longer a battle for survival. It was a battle for freedom, a battle they could win. Humanity's strength had inspired a galaxy to rise up, and now they were fighting not just for their survival, but for their future. The tide was turning, and the invaders began to feel it. They could no longer deny the truth. Humanity had returned, and they had come to win. The galaxy was no longer the broken and fearful place it had been. The resistance had grown stronger with each passing day, united under humanity's banner. The invaders had underestimated the resolve of a galaxy once thought defeated, and they were paying the price for it. The human fleet moved like a hammer, and the resistance forces were the anvil. With each battle, they struck a blow against the alien alliance, and their grip on the galaxy slowly began to loosen. The invaders' command structure was crumbling. Their fleets were scattered, their forces were disorganized and fractured. They no longer had the unity that had once made them so powerful. Resistance forces from every corner of the galaxy struck when and where they could. They didn't wait for permission, they didn't wait for orders. They fought with a ferocity that had once seemed unimaginable, and they fought together because they believed in victory. Humanity had given them that belief. They had shown them what was possible. With every victory, humanity's reputation grew. They were no longer just another species in the galaxy. They were the vanguard of freedom, the bringers of vengeance against the invaders. The entire galaxy looked to them now for leadership and guidance. They had become the symbol of hope that the galaxy so desperately needed. Their fleet had grown even larger. New ships had been built in the wake of the victories, and more forces from free systems joined the fight. The invaders had never faced a threat like this before. On the front lines, humanity's commanders coordinated their forces with precision. Their tactics had become flawless, their strategies unstoppable. They attacked in waves, overwhelming the enemy with sheer numbers and brutal force. They knew how to break the enemy's will to fight. They didn't need to be everywhere. They just needed to be in the right place at the right time. They struck at the heart of the invaders' power, and each time they did, they made a dent in their empire. But the invaders had not given up. They were fierce. They were determined to hold on to what they had gained, and they would stop at nothing to keep control of the galaxy. But the resistance had learned too much from humanity. They had adapted their tactics. They had fought alongside the humans and learned from their discipline and strength. They no longer feared the invaders. They had become the invaders' worst nightmare. As the human fleet advanced into the heart of enemy territory, the invaders were desperate. Their commanders issued orders to regroup to counterattack, but it was too late. Humanity's warships cut through the enemy's defenses like a knife through butter. Their ships now moved with a ruthlessness that left the enemy reeling. Each battle ended with the invaders retreating further back into the farthest reaches of their territory. The resistance pressed on. They would not stop now, not after everything they had lost, not after everything they had fought for. Humanity had given them hope, and they would not let that hope slip away. Now they could taste victory. It was within their grasp, and they could see the end of the war on the horizon. The galaxy was on the verge of something new, something it hadn't seen in centuries, a chance to rebuild, a chance to reclaim what had been taken from them, and a chance to live free from the fear of the invaders. Humanity had become the spark that ignited the revolution, the driving force behind the final push, and now nothing could stand in their way. The final battle had arrived. The last stronghold of the alien alliance lay before them, and the galaxy held its breath as humanity's fleet advanced with relentless purpose. The invaders had nowhere left to retreat. They were trapped in their own desperation, their ships scattered across the battlefield like the remnants of a broken empire. Their command structure shattered, their will to fight in tatters. Humanity's war fleet had grown even more formidable over the course of the conflict. New ships, new technologies, new tactics, all designed to ensure victory. They moved with the precision of a finely tuned machine. Each strike calculated, each maneuver executed flawlessly. The Resistance now stood beside humanity, their forces bolstered by the technology and strength the humans had brought to the table. The galaxy had finally united behind a common cause, the fight for freedom, the fight for survival, and they were determined to win. The invaders tried to hold their ground, but they were outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered. Their fleets were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. Humanity had shattered their morale with each battle they fought, with each victory they secured, and now the enemy was losing the will to resist. The final assault began in the heart of the enemy's strongest defenses. Humanity's fleet surged forward like a tidal wave, crashing against the walls of the invaders' empire. Their ships tore through the defenses. With ease, the invaders fought back with what little they had left, but it was clear they were fighting a losing battle. Humanity's warships were unstoppable, their weapon systems devastating, their tactics ruthless. On the ground, the Resistance forces launched their own assault as the human fleet provided air support. They pushed deep into the heart of the enemy's stronghold, and with each step they took, they shattered the invaders' hold over the planet. The fighting was brutal, but the Resistance was unrelenting, their morale high from the victories humanity had led them to, and from the hope that they could finally break free from the invaders' rule. In space, the final moments of the battle unfolded. Humanity's fleet moved in for the kill. They surrounded the last remaining command ship of the alien alliance, a massive vessel that had once been the symbol of their power, now a symbol of their impending defeat. The human fleet closed in with deadly precision, their weapons fired in unison, and the alien flagship was torn apart in a fiery explosion that echoed across the battlefield. The last vestiges of the enemy's forces crumbled in the wake of the destruction, and the galaxy erupted in celebration. The war was over, the invaders were defeated, and the galaxy was free. But the victory came at a cost. The galaxy had been scarred by years of war. Entire civilizations had fallen, worlds had been lost, and millions of lives had been extinguished. But in the aftermath, humanity stood tall. They had brought hope to the galaxy, and they had fought for the freedom of those who could not fight for themselves. Now they would help rebuild what had been broken. The galaxy looked to humanity not as a conqueror, but as a savior. They had proven that anything was possible, even in the darkest of times. They had shown that no matter the odds, no matter how impossible the enemy seemed, they could overcome, they could win. And now the galaxy was ready for a new era, one where unity and freedom would flourish once more. Humanity had not just returned to the galaxy, they had changed it forever. They had brought hope where there was none. They had brought victory when defeat seemed inevitable. And they had reminded the galaxy that no force, no matter how powerful, could ever extinguish the spirit of those who fought for what was right. And so the new age began.